talked in a video yesterday about David Goggins' concept of our minds have a tactical advantage over us. And, I mentioned in that concept really resonates with me, and I think it's really interesting on a number of levels. One of which is, so again, the concept being, let's say you want to start running, you want to get in shape, you want to start running, and you tell yourself like, yep, I'm going to start doing it. But your mind has this tactical advantage, right? If you're not really committed to it, if it's not something that you're really disciplined on and really want to do, it's more of an aspiration, your mind knows how to divert you from it, right? It knows how to tell you that there's these excuses you should take. It knows your insecurities, it knows your fears, it knows how you think, how you run your math, and it will find a way to stop you from doing that potentially. What people often go to account for that or to address that issue is what I would call like gimmicks or tricks, or some people might call them just approaches or systems. But to me, it's almost a little bit like cheating, right? The way people will try and solve these issues. So let's stick with the example. So you decide you want to start running, and you tell yourself like, okay, I'm going to run 2 miles every other day, and you tell yourself that, and you start the process. Maybe you run the first day, you don't, and then you're on and off with it. You're not consistent. Some days you get busy at work. Some days family life gets too hectic and gets in the way, and you're missing too many days here and there. And you say, okay, this isn't working. So I need something to fix this. I need to account for the fact that I can't trust myself to do what I seemingly want to do. So you might go down a path of, all right, you know what, I'm going to start running in the morning. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to game this thing, and I'm going to run in the morning, so there's no excuses, right? No work getting in the way. I'll do it before anybody else gets up. Like that'll be the answer. So you set your alarm at 5:30 a.m. in the morning, and you're going to start running. And maybe for the first few days you do, right? You wake up and you go for those runs, but it's miserable and it's early and it's it sucks. And maybe one of those days you wake up and it's raining and you're like, all right, well, I'm not going to do that. And maybe another day the alarm goes off and you're just exhausted, so you hit the snooze, right? And there's still, your mind still can kind of win out in that. So you say, okay, I'm going to take this a step further. I'm gonna put another approach or gimmick in place here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sneakers, my running sneakers and my running clothes, and I'm going to put them in the bathroom on top of the toilet. Because this way, when I wake up in the morning and I go to the bathroom, I'll have to take the sneakers off, and by doing that, it'll remind me like, hey, I need to go run, and it'll force me into that process. Then again, maybe that works for a time, where that process where you're forcing yourself to engage with the decision, and you're actually picking up the sneakers. You have to go to the bathroom. You put them on, you go for the run, and that works for a while. But we've all seen this movie before. Eventually, perhaps you either stop putting the sneakers on the toilet because you're just like, I don't want to do that anymore, or you just move them in the morning and go to the bathroom and then go back and lay down, right? Totally possible. And it doesn't always happen that way. I don't mean to disparage the approach or some of these tricks too much, because I think it can be useful as a way to jumpstart you and get you into a routine and get you moving. But to me, it's always going to come back to the math in your head. If the math doesn't check out in that moment that you want to go for a run, and that the benefit of going for a run is worth it, it's higher than the costs, all the tricks in the world aren't going to work in the long term. They're just not, right? They may, in a short term, they may adjust the calculation enough to where you do it, but to me, it'll keep coming back to what you ultimately want to do or don't want to do. So what's the approach? Well, to me, the approach has to be, you have to get into the mud, as I would say, and actually understand the math behind your decision. What's really going on here? Why am I not running, right? And I could see somebody saying to that, like, yeah, I kind of get that, but it's just easier to remove the math, remove the equation, remove the calculation, and just force yourself into it in some way, right? Make it where the decision is no longer in your hands. You have to run, right? I mean, you can go to an extreme and say, I sell my car, so anywhere I have to go, I have to run to. You can go to places like that. And you can think of it in other scenarios too. Like if you're trying to save money, you start doing it through a 401k where it's forced, taken out of your paycheck. You have no choice. You can't take money out of it, right? There's all different scenarios in which you can put these tricks in place to seemingly eliminate the equation and just force yourself to do the thing that you think you want to do. But again, my issue with that is whenever you're removing the equation, whenever you're doing that, you run the risk that in that case, you're actually not acting logically, right? If you're eliminating the equation, you're eliminating the thought process, you're eliminating the opportunity to actually understand what's driving your actions and your decisions, you might not come up with the optimal solution, right? So take the running example that we're going with. Let's stick with that for a second. So you decide you want to run, you run that calculation on a certain day, maybe it's around New Year's because you're starting a resolution and you're going to get in shape, and you say, all right, I'm going to start running, however often. Great. Now you assume that decision is the right decision. You assume that that's what you should be doing. You stop questioning it. You just say, I'm going to put whatever tricks in place I have to, whatever cheats I have to put in place to make sure I do this. And again, maybe it works a bit in the short term, but it doesn't work in the long term. Or you do it, but it's just so painful throughout that eventually, again, you end up quitting because it's just, you can't sustain it. Versus if you actually question that and say, hey, I've been trying to run for a month now. I told myself it's what I want to do, but I'm not doing it consistently. Like, what's up? Why am I not doing this? Right? What's the problem that I'm having? You might realize that there's a legitimate problem. Maybe when you wake up at 5:30 in the morning to go for that run, you end up waking up your wife or your kids, and that's just too much of a hassle. You can't take that risk, and you say, screw it. So maybe the morning's not the right time to run, and you're trying to solve for the wrong problem. You're trying to solve for you being lazy, when maybe the real issue is it's the time in which you're trying to run. So you should be doing it at a different time in the day. But because you're bypassing the calculation now, you're not really understanding it, you missed the opportunity for that. Or maybe even a step further, maybe you were wrong in assuming that running is what you should be doing. Maybe you hate running and you're trying to force a square peg into a round hole, and what you should be doing is swimming or yoga or whatever the other thing is. But because you've just almost blindly said, well, I decided I want to run, so I'm going to put these gimmicks in place that force me to do this, you missed that opportunity. So I think, again, the right approach has to be circle back and understand what's really happening in your math. Do you have the right objective? Are you really trying to do something that you genuinely believe and want to do? Is it the right thing to do? What's the problem that's actually preventing you from doing it? Only once you work all of that out can you actually then figure out what the right kind of intervening actions are. And at that point, it might be helpful for you to use some of these gimmicks or cheats, if you will, because you are sure it's what you want to do, and there's just some little hurdles you need to overcome. But bypassing that step, which I think often happens, and just jumping to these systems, right? You read a book on something and you say, oh, I'm gonna hang a guitar on the wall, right, in my room, because then I'll always be forced to look at it and then I'll be more likely to play it. Maybe. But maybe that's not the issue, that you forget about it. Maybe the issue is that you just work in a job you hate and you don't have any time to do it, or you're too exhausted at the end of the day. Or maybe you don't like the guitar that much. You should be playing the piano or playing Frisbee, whatever it is. To me, it's always better to understand. Get all the inputs you can. Understand your thinking. Really see what's going on there. Don't try and bypass it. Don't try and just put cheats in and gimmicks in for the sake of it. Use them effectively and logically to actually get to the objective you want to achieve.